Welcome to Starting Different with my dear friend, Colleen McKenna. CMAC, I call her CMAC. How are you doing this morning, CMAC?
I am well this morning. Thank you for asking. Great to
CMAC is the right name. This is one of the most effective people I've ever met in my life. She's just a killer when it comes to what she knows about networking and she's just one of the kindest people I've ever met in terms of what she does. So, Colleen, there was a reason that I wanted you as my 10th guest. By the way, I've had 10 guests so far on the show. I picked 10 speakers that I knew could make a difference for people in times of disruption. I started with Dr. Bill, and I ended with you for a reason. But let me just say, Dr. Bill, and we have almost 1,000 views of the interview with Dr. Bill, teaches people how to eliminate stress and anxiety in like 8 seconds. And you help people navigate this jungle of LinkedIn. But let me ask you, other than the fact that all of these people, well, almost all but one, are Vistage speakers, what do you think the people on this list have in common?
Well, I think we're all experts. We all have a very specific niche.
Got that. I covered that. Listen, we only got a limited time. I want a different answer. What else do you think they all have in common?
They're all good people. They're all friends of yours.
Beyond that, they are all part of this community, which is LinkedIn. Every single one of the people I just showed has a profile on LinkedIn. Every single one of these people does the 3 things that Tom Peters talked about in 1999. You know, Prince said, let's party like it's 1999, right? He didn't realize we'd be looking back at it. But Tom Peters says, think of yourself as a brand. Each one of those speakers whose names I just put up is an individual brand. They're using LinkedIn to let people know who they are and what they stand for. They're using LinkedIn to show people their projects, and they're using LinkedIn to connect with their products and services, right? So we are a community, folks, and this is about how we navigate this massive time of disruption and change. I've had these couple of slides go up for the last couple episodes. I say the universe won't accept the same. We're seeing that this week. We're seeing that this month. It's only growth or decline, and it's your choice which you're going to pick. I send my guests a picture of the sunrise. So Colleen, I apologize for the 7 a.m. text, but it was better than the one that Henry got out in California at 4 a.m.
Right.
But today was a cloudy day, and I really felt that about this session. I had thought yesterday about canceling this session, and I mean the sun eventually comes out as it does every day, and we eventually remind ourselves why we're doing this. And I got this wonderful note this morning, and Valerie, I hope you're watching this on the replay, from someone who said, Dean, you're not alone. And we really appreciate the stuff you've been doing for the community. And I look forward to seeing your notes on LinkedIn. She says, it's become part of my Saturday or Sunday morning ritual since the pandemic, except for the week you posted late. So CMAX, she wanted to kick my butt just a little bit. Okay, but that's okay, Valerie. I love you for sending that note. Guys, I spent a whole week, but didn't have to, with Dr. Bill and Colleen because their stuff is already so well put together. But guys, what if there was a button you could push to better define your brand, to better showcase your projects? By the way, these books, you can buy them for a whole $2.75 if you go to Amazon now. Look at the used copies, guys, okay? So there's no reason. By the way, we're going to give you 3 specific things to do at the end of this, but Tom Peters gives you 50 if you really want to go deeper. Okay, so here's the bottom line, Colleen. The bottom line for this session. What if there was a button? What if there was a button that you guys could push in the brain to get better clients, to get better careers, to get better connections? Well, there is such a button. And if you had that button, I know you would want to hit that button. And that button is, I believe, LinkedIn. So Colleen, tell us, just top of mind, what do we need to know about the size of LinkedIn, because it's overwhelming? Give us a couple of bullet points, and I just want to show something to the folks here. Colleen sent me her slideshow, and there's 409 slot. Okay, and she wasn't just showing off. There really is a lot to know. I'm not going to go through 409 slides, but Colleen, give us the couple of bullet points we need to know about why and what about LinkedIn. How big is it? And give us your thoughts.
Absolutely. So there are about 680 million plus members of LinkedIn right now. LinkedIn, as most people probably know, is owned by Microsoft, where there's over 1.2 billion Microsoft users. So there's a lot of space for LinkedIn to grow into. And that is one of the reasons Microsoft purchased LinkedIn, and LinkedIn was attracted to being purchased by Microsoft.
You know, would I be wrong in saying that everyone in business is on LinkedIn?
Well, being on LinkedIn, I think, is a relative term. So there's being on LinkedIn.
Correct.
Using
Exactly.
LinkedIn. Sure.
Exactly. We'll talk about my terror surrounding LinkedIn and my love-hate relationship with LinkedIn, which you've helped me to navigate. But I'll tell you a little bit about the background of Colleen in a minute. We're going to talk about the stuff she does as a speaker and a coach and the stuff she's done with thousands of CEOs and executives. But I want to start with a question that James Clear posed this morning. And the question is, what is the biggest small thing you can do today? Because I'm going to cover 3 specific things I want you to think about. I'm going to talk to you about how you can make a recommendation for one of your friends or clients, how you can give. I'm going to talk about how you can connect through an introduction, one of your friends or clients with someone you think they should know. I'm going to talk about the power of paying a compliment, and I'm going to link it back to brain science. We're going to cover 5 brain shortcuts, and we're going to apply them back to LinkedIn. So before I have Colleen jump in, I'd like everyone to take out 2 sheets of paper. So the first sheet of paper, I would just like you to write the word pen, P-E-N, and on the top of the sheet of paper, I want you to write profile. In the middle of the sheet of paper, I want you to write engage. And in your bottom third, I want you to write nurture. These are what I say are CMAC's top 3 things. So I want you to take out a pen and write the word pen, because I'm going to ask you guys to think about what's one thing you can do powerfully with your profile. I'm going to ask you to think about what's one thing you can do to engage with your audience, your community. I'm going to ask you what's one thing you can do to nurture your relationships. Colleen's going to give you some ideas. And by the way, you can do any one of these things in about 3 minutes. And Colleen's going to show you where to do that on your LinkedIn account. Okay, second piece of paper. I want you to take a second sheet of paper out. And I want you to do this. I want you to use the entire sheet of paper to draw a chart. Basically, the chart you see here. On the left hand of the side of the chart, I want you to write gain. On the bottom of the chart, I want you to write pain. And you're going to have 4 quadrants. Colleen, CMAC, Dr. Bill Crawford are quadrant 1 friends of mine. I knew that they could provide people massive gains and they were going to be really easy for me to work with. So that's why Dr. Bill was the first person. That's why CMAC is the last person. Some of the other speakers didn't have any PowerPoints. I knew it was going to be a ton of work. They were not going to be as easy for me. Here's what I want you guys to think about. The things that Colleen shares with you, I want you to plot them on this chart. Are they going to be high gain for you, and are they going to be easy for you to do? And I just want you to pick a couple that you're going to do this week. Because remember, your brain and anyone you're interacting with on LinkedIn, their brain has 2 goals. The first is to survive, and the second is to save energy. So that's what that chart says, okay? That chart says, tell me how you're going to impact me, and tell me how it's going to be easy for me to work with you. Okay, so that's the magic mirror. So Colleen, do you remember how you and I met?
We met at Vistage Studio in New York City.
Really?
And then we met again in San Diego as part of the Vistage Speaker Council. And you came up to me and you said, I need to talk to you. I hate LinkedIn. I'm afraid.
Hate it? Hate it?
I'm afraid.
I hate it because it feels like it's the end of the internet. I go on there, I get lost, they change stuff, I don't know how it works. It feels like cold calling felt when I first started cold calling until I got good at it. And it feels like everyone on LinkedIn is trying to cold call me. And then we met at the Vistage Speakers Council. So for those of you who aren't aware, Vistage is the largest CEO membership organization in the world, 25,000 members. It's something that I know Colleen and I love dearly because of the people who are involved, especially the chairs and the members who meet in small groups all around the world. And Colleen has been a speaker. How many Vistage groups do you think you've presented to, Colleen?
Oh, not nearly as many as you. Probably, I mean, over 100, probably somewhere 100, 125, 130. So it's
And
not,
how many Vistage chairs do you think you've helped develop their chair practice?
probably close to 200, 250.
So what Colleen does is actually helps them use LinkedIn to make the connections they need to find members for their group. And there's certain secrets that she knows. And like I've been saying with my other speakers, everything's a secret till someone shows you. So Colleen, I want you to make some of the curriculum that is invisible normally. I want you to make it intentional. And the first thing I want you to do, and you today are going to talk about circles of influence. So why don't you take a moment, and then I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the triggers of influence, but talk about this concept, circles of influence, and how you help people think about their community on LinkedIn.
So these are really, to me, some of the most important people in your community, in your network. And we have to understand who we're connected to. So people call us all the time and they say, I need more prospects. I need to find more. I need to fill up my, sales funnel. And we can do that all day long. But my first question always is, who are you already connected to? Let's identify these circles of influence.
So pause for a second. I got maybe 5,000 or more people I'm connected with. I have no idea who I'm connected with. And this exercise that Colleen asked me to start doing is extremely powerful because not everyone's created equally, number one. And number two, Colleen, you have a really interesting statistic that the business owners and managers on the phone I want to think about. Think about the circles of influence of everyone on your team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just their personal circles. Talk for a moment about how much more power organizations can get from LinkedIn if they start thinking about their employees' circles of influence.
So a couple of stats. On average, an employee on your team will have 10 times more first level connections than a company will have company page followers. So that's one thing to think about. The other, on the sales side, very specifically, is that you are 5 times more likely to get a meeting or a phone call. Right now it's a phone call if you have an introduction. So we have to identify these these people who are connectors. And I define a center or circle of influence as someone who knows, likes, and trusts you. Like, and trust them. They use LinkedIn and they have a good network. And we only ask clients, I'll say to somebody, Dino, just give me 6 people. I don't want 50 people. So it does make it easier to go through the exercise when you download your first level connections and you sort them by position and company to narrow them down by who are the 6 to 6, maybe 10 people that you know really, really well, and they know you. And then we can begin to look and see who they're connected to that you should be connected to, because they're.
So there's something that I did, Colleen, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I had never really used LinkedIn. And once I did this, I never went back and looked at LinkedIn again. But I'm really about shortcuts in an honest and ethical way and being expedient. And I noticed that there was a Vistage speaker who knew all the chairs in America. And I wanted the chairs in America to know me.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably spent 10 cross-country flights connecting with everyone that she was already connected with. Once I connected with her, I connected with everyone she was already connected with. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't have someone going around the country telling chairs about me. So I had to tell chairs, I've done that for the speakers I've loved. I did that for Dr. Bill. I've done that for other folks. But the point is, what are your thoughts about finding a person who's already doing or connected to who you want to be? What are your thoughts about that? And by the way, is the ability to make that shortcut kind of taken away from people now as people have closed their networks?
Well, it definitely makes it harder if they have a closed network, because then they can only see the people that they share in common. They can't look inside that new connections network. And it's okay. We do a lot of LinkedIn lead generation. Last year, my team looked at over 54,000 LinkedIn profiles for LinkedIn business development and outreach. The key is having a process, and the key is personalizing it as much as you possibly can. CEOs, CFOs, they're smart people. They know when it feels it's automated, and they know when it doesn't feel right. And so we work a very, very specific process. We do not deviate from our process because our process works.
Well, we'll talk about the process in a minute. We'll talk about the process in a minute. I just want to pull the thread because you kind of wove two things that I thought were pretty compelling. The first is to remember that this is a human interaction.
Yeah.
The other thing that's important to remember is that this idea of automated, I respond personally to all of my LinkedIn contacts, but I know a lot of people don't. And the thing that I'm like, I'll send them a note. Is this you or is this your assistant, you know? So, you know, that's the other thing that freaks. Okay, so we're going to come back to this and I'm going to share with them some of your process in a minute. Let's just remind ourselves of the triggers of influence, because I see shortcuts and I think it's, you know, partly I see things differently because I started going blind when I was 17. And, you know, I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for shortcuts. Everyone's brain is. I think mine more so than others. And I want to encourage you guys with the three things you write down to consider this, some forcing mechanisms for you to get moving. Colleen and I are both fans of BJ Fogg's new book, Tiny Steps, and the brain likes small steps, okay? So think about that as you go through this. So Colleen's gonna talk to you about your profile, about how to engage and how to nurture, but specifically, now I'd like Colleen to go through each of these three thoughts. And I'm going to give you the brain science behind it. But the first thought that I'd like us to focus on, Colleen, is how do people make recommendations and why? And I just want to show you, I open up my door and I get a note from Princess Ella. Princess Ella is the 7-year-old next door. This is how she says hi, Dino, and that she's got Smarties for me, of course. And because Princess Ella knows when you leave something, the small act of kindness sparks people's brains. And Ella, you know, she'll drop off for me sometimes things she thinks I need during this time period. You know, because I'm her friend. She brought me toothpaste, and it's not a new thing of toothpaste. It was used. But the point is, it's how Ella was raised, and I believe that it's how we were raised, and I believe it's how the people on this call were raised. My client Scout sent me some gifts. They sent me some Scout bags, and the way my grandmother raised me, I made vegetable stew for everyone in the neighborhood and gave it to them with these Scout bags. Guys, I want you to think about the community that you have now on LinkedIn. And remember, everyone is in your neighborhood, even if you're sequestered at home. Their brain is focused on keeping them alive and using as little energy as possible to do that. And there's shortcuts that they use, okay? What I'm going to call brain whispers. So I'm going to talk about, for each one of these things we talk about, which one of these 7, we're going to cover 5 of them as we go through in the next 10 minutes. The first one is the one I already talked about, this concept of motion. A thing in motion tends to stay in motion, guys. So I want you to take out your pens and write things down and commit to doing some things today. And I want you to remember, everything today is personal. And the little things are the big things again. Now, the reason Ella brought me gifts is because I had cooked for her family previously. There's this concept of reciprocity, and people want you to know they got your back when they like you. So anyways, we're going to go through some of these things. Colleen, number 1, let's talk about recommend. What can people do to make a recommendation for someone else? And I'm going to pull up a profile. Let me just pull up before I do that. Let me pull up John Dame's profile. Right. So here's the snapshot you took, and over on the right it says request a recommendation. I'm going to suggest people hit the button below that to recommend. What are your thoughts on thinking about who you can make a recommendation for and why? Before I share my thoughts on the brain science behind it.
Well, I think it's really powerful. A recommendation goes a long way in LinkedIn, way more than an endorsement, which is just really a nod, a thumbs up, a like. So a recommendation means somebody's taken a few minutes to write something about you. I think it's really important for us to be writing recommendations for others. And there's a lot of people that we can be thinking about in our network we could be recommending. It could be a client.
What would be some, yep.
Could be a client, could be a colleague, It could be a referral source. It could be somebody you network with regularly, one of those circles of influence. And you want to just send them a recommendation. How great. You open up LinkedIn, somebody's recommended you, and you have to accept it before it shows up on your profile. But it is a great way to help somebody else out. And it takes very little effort, but it means a lot.
Think about the brain concept of reciprocity, the cognitive bias I call giving. It's the reason I'm doing these workshops for free. For these 10, I said, who within my network can I do something for? What can I give them? Now, when I talk about give, and I just want to change the frame and have you think about this, think about who in your network you'd want to give a tip to if they had been a bartender. Think about a tip cup. So one of the brain shortcuts is we look for evidence to see what other people have done. It's the reason bartenders put out tip cups. The problem is a lot of people are embarrassed to ask for a tip. A lot of people on this call don't want to reach out. And so I'm going to suggest you flip it. Instead of asking for it, I want you to start giving it yourself. And I want you to see that people will reciprocate. And I'm going to give you another example. My friend Colt Clark is a musician down here at the Don Cesar. And a month ago, when all of this COVID stuff hit, Colt called me and said, I have no income coming in. And I said, Colt, let me set up a virtual tip jar for you. And why don't you start posting some videos? Colleen, I took the picture this morning. We've raised Colt has raised 32,000 in the tip jar that I set up. And his family, as you know, was on Ellen last week. They have an international following. Guys, I'm just giving you an example of how amazing things can happen if you think about your friends and think about things that you can do for them. So, virtual show of hands. Right now, I want you to think about who you can set up a thank you for, who you can make a recommendation for. Okay, so we've talked about, go ahead, yeah.
And I really encourage people when you're making that recommendation to be very specific, not so-and-so is a great person, but really be intentional. Think about very specific ways about attributes and behaviors, right?
Yeah. So let me put up the shortcut here from my. Well, you know what? I had it here, and this goes back to Dean not doing the rehearsal that Dean normally does because he was feeling drained. But let me give you the 3 questions to ask of yourself and your relationship with your friend. You ready? Let me make this easy because long testimonials are not what you need to write. Okay, what you need to write is 1 or 2 lines. So answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what is the problem that person solved for you? Number 2, how were they different from someone else you could have gone to for help? Number 3, how would you describe them to someone who has never seen them or worked with them before? Those are the 3 questions. Okay. All right. Number 2, who do you know, who is in your network that you could introduce to someone else? Colleen, talk about the power of us giving an introduction and like here's Dr. Bill. Dr. Bill is a first level connection for me. He's a second level connection for you. What would you recommend I do to help you connect with Dr. Bill? Because I believe Dr. Bill is someone you should know.
So you can go right to your messaging center within LinkedIn, create a new message, and introduce us right within LinkedIn. We have context for each other immediately because I can look at Dr. Bill's LinkedIn profile and see how many connections we have in common and who he is. So like that better in LinkedIn than just an email because I have that context. Super easy to do. I love putting people together because guess what? When you introduce 2 people in your network to one another, what do you think the first thing they do? Who do they talk about first? You. It's not a bad thing.
Yep.
And it's meaningful. Since I started in tarot in 2011, I've never made a cold call, not because I don't know how to, but because I've been a beneficiary of so many fabulous introductions.
So one of the 7 shortcuts that I talk about from behavioral psychology is this principle of giving. And when I teach my class, I talk about what can you invite people to, like this. Who can you make an introduction to? That's what we were just talking about. And the principle is more commonly referred to as reciprocity. When you do that, when you provide something of value to people, and guys, your network is really of value. And I'm not suggesting you need to do hundreds of these, but right now, take a moment, just virtual, raise your hand and write down, who do you know that you can introduce, that you can connect with each other? You know, listen, we can't solve all the world's problems or all of America's problems, but we can do some things. We can get started. So who can you make connections to? So let's talk about the third bullet point that I had brought up. How do we encourage people to reach out and connect with people that they don't know yet?
So one of the ways we can do that, if we go back to the idea of giving somebody a shout out maybe. So we maybe do a post for somebody and we include their name in that post. They typically get mentioned if we do it correctly by putting an @ symbol in front of their name, but we can pay them a compliment or give them a shout out so they get greater visibility on LinkedIn. Everybody needs to be elevated on LinkedIn through their profile, their network, and how they engage.
So the first suggestion was make a recommendation. Second suggestion, make an introduction. Third, pay a compliment. So here is my buddy, Rob Cujo Teschner, was a lead instructor at the Top Gun Academy. If you were going to pay Rob an honest compliment, what would you say to Rob? I'm just throwing out an idea here, and you and I didn't rehearse this, but if you wanted to connect with Rob, how would you pay him a compliment?
So if I wanted to connect with him, I'd press that connect button, which would enable me to see a pop-up that says add a note. And I'd add a note and I would say, Cujo, loved the session you did with Dean Minuto, would love the opportunity to connect, love your story, Colleen.
Boom. When we pay people a compliment, and by the way, there's brain science here, guys. I refer to the 3 C's. There's brain science. When you find things in common with people, they're basically saying, this person is like me. That's a person you have in common. But when you pay them a compliment, as Valerie did with the beautiful note she sent me today, people's brains release a chemical called dopamine. And dopamine makes you feel really good. And guys, it doesn't take a huge amount of effort. So Colleen's other thoughts, ways to find things in common, ways to pay a compliment, ways to show that you're collaborating with people just with what you see on their LinkedIn profile. Anything you can think about that you've seen in the last couple of days?
Well, we were having a conversation and we were talking about music yesterday. And remember, I mentioned to you a particular person's profile. When we pulled it up, in the first line of his about section, he talked about his love for jazz music. And I loved that because he personalized his story on LinkedIn. So it's not an online resume. I knew something about him that I could start a conversation with immediately.
So do you suggest that in people's profile, they share some personal interests?
I do. Absolutely.
Because we didn't talk a lot about profile. Are there any other things that come to mind when you think about things people can do quickly as they look at their profile? Here's an example. As you look at your profile, folks, does it include all of the shortcuts of authority that you already have? Does it include the courses you've taken? Does it include certifications you have? Are you listing your education on your profile? Just as an idea. Colleen, other thoughts?
Can you go back to Dr. Bill's profile, please?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What I love about Dr. Bill's profile, number one, it starts right at the top. Look at that great background image. So don't let LinkedIn's background image be your background image. Personalize it, brand it, put your logo in there. Great photo. He's the only person in the photo.
Wait, give us a shortcut, because these background images are required to be a certain size. So what's the tool you guys use to create that size of a photo? How do you do that quickly and easily?
We use something called Canva, CANVA.com. Super easy. If you're a designer, want to be like me, it's like it'll be your best friend.
Does it cost anything or is it free?
You can use, there's a free version. We use Canva at work because we use it so much. We use it.
And then what do you do to make sure that the picture fits? Because this isn't a normal size picture. That would be too easy. And it's one of the reasons I hate LinkedIn. Making it a normal size picture would have been too easy. Go ahead.
It has to be 1584 by 396 pixels. So just need to know so it is not pixelated. So really, this 4-color image draws you immediately into Dr. Bill's profile. And notice under his name, he doesn't just have a title. This is the headline area. He's built in specific keywords. If you go to our website or you know anything about what I talk about over and over, it's keyword your profile for SEO, right? You need to keyword it. LinkedIn is a search engine, just like Google. So here, speaker, psychologist, trainer, coach, these are all good keywords. They describe who Dr. Bill is. And just from the top, if I don't even scroll down anymore, I know who he is. And I love that.
So guys, becoming better is a process. So the question I ask you to consider is, what is not using LinkedIn the right way costing you right now? I'm not talking about huge leaps. Improve 1% a day. In 70 days, you're twice as good. Colleen's given you fantastic suggestions around what to do with your profile. We've talked about how you can engage and nurture people. Colleen, is there anything you'd like to add before I show people how they can reach out? And I think you also wanted to make an offer for the online stuff you do.
Right. I think my last comment is there's never been more people on LinkedIn than there is right now. And people are using it. I want people to use it intentionally. I want you to commit to a period of time, 30 minutes, 3 times a week, but be really intentional about your process and have a strategy for how you use LinkedIn, especially for business development. It can be a very, very strong way to engage with others and shorten your sales cycle.
So I learn from Colleen every time I interact with her, and I reached out to her more than a year ago because I realized I'm a stumbling, bumbling idiot with what I do on LinkedIn, and still am, and need to get better. Colleen's course is, if you guys look at this link, inside.interoadvisory.com. If you look at that link, she has an online course, and there's a freemium portion of it. So what do they get? A couple of the modules for free to get them started? Is that how it works, Colleen?
Absolutely. You'll get mindset and personal branding. Personal branding is all about your profile, how to build a profile, how to do all your settings, and make sure you're set up correctly. So that's the first thing. Critical.
So just a thought. So here's how I end all the sessions, and we're right there at about the 32-minute mark, Colleen. My favorite statue, my favorite artist, Bobby Carlyle. I end every single presentation. Self-made man. This individual is carving himself, revealing himself from granite. And Colleen, I think of you as an instrument that helps people do this. I think of all really good Vistage speakers and coaches as an instrument that's helping people do this. So it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, but it was what we made of it. Folks, thank you for attending another Starting Different. You're never starting over, you're always starting different. Colleen, what do you think? Should we say goodbye to everyone?
Have a great day. It was great to be with you all, and thanks for the privilege of your time.
And we're going to end in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Oh, I'm going to put the video up in a couple of hours. It takes a couple hours. That's for whoever wants to break my stones about not being fast enough with it. Okay? All right, Colleen, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Here.